everyone. My name is Paul, and I am a nerd, and you are not. Or maybe you are, but you probably are not, because if you were, you might not be here, because this is the Tabs3 virtual user group meeting for October of 2016. Not just October, but Halloween. This is our special Halloween episode. And so, of course, all hell has broken loose today. Mary Jo is not here because her husband's sick. And not only is she not here with me, but he was feeling so bad that they moved his appointment up, and she's not here remotely either. So I'm all by myself. I've been briefed. Mary Jo has told me what she was going to talk about, so I know how to do a monthly retainer in Tabs, because that was going to be Mary Jo's topic. And I am going to talk about setting up and using credit cards. And we have another exciting happening today, in that Leanne has retired. No, she has not retired from Attorney Computer Systems, but she has retired from being our humble moderator. Now, that doesn't mean she's going to be a crabby moderator. It means she's gone. And instead, Patty is our new humble moderator. Say hello, Patty.
Hello, everybody.
Do you know why mummies don't have any friends?
I do know why mummies don't
Why
have friends,
don't
Paul.
mummies have any friends, Patty?
Because they are too wrapped up in themselves.
Patty says that's the only joke she knows. So we'll go with that for today. Now, before we get into these wonderful topics, of which I am taking the full brunt of responsibility for today, I'm going to press a series of magic buttons. We don't have just one magic button here. We have a series of magic buttons. We're going to save that because we changed the name on the front screen from Leanne to Patty. Exciting moment here at Attorney Computer Systems. And I'm going to go over here to Tabs, where we are going to talk about several things. Now, I'm going to start with monthly retainer, and I'm going to make a disclaimer because I messed up. So if you go to our website and you see how we described how we sold, this is what we call it, how we sold this webinar, I made a mistake. So if we look here at the description, we said that I would demonstrate how to use progress billing feature to create automatic monthly retainers. I didn't mean to say progress billing. So now I have to explain what progress billing is, and then I'm going to show you how to use a quote-unquote saved transaction to automatically create recurring monthly retainers for your clients. More on that in a second. So what is this progress billing? Progress billing is a way to bill a set amount each month, and then at the same time log billable entries that will keep accumulating. It's more of a monthly retainer for a contingent fee case, as opposed to what I'm going to show you today, which is a monthly retainer that's ongoing, regardless of what you do, and you never even up against it. With progress billing, you might say, hey, I'll take your case, and I'm pretty sure we're going to win, but you're still going to pay me $500 a month for the next 6 months, and then we'll even up my time against what we've billed so far. So I guess to say it's a contingent case is not true. It's more a matter of we're going to accumulate time, we're going to bill $500 a month, and at the end of the month, we're going to hit, or at the end of the 6 months, we're going to hit a button that says either that you don't owe us anymore, or that you still owe us a little more because we logged more time. That's progress billing. What I'm going to show you today, and we will probably come back to this topic at a later date, but it's more something for Mary Jo to explain to you. Today, what we meant to talk about was a monthly retainer, and that's something that, of course, hopefully goes on forever. You have a new client, let's say it's a bank, you're going to bill them $1,000 a month, and you're pretty much going to do whatever they need you to do within certain limits. And so you may want to keep track of the time that you're billing. You may want to show the time that you're logging, I should say, but you don't want to bill that time because you're just going to bill a flat $1,000. Here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to go back into Tabs, and now that I've cleared up my terminology, I'm going to pull up ABC, I think it's ABC Bank. Yes, ABC Bank. And maybe this is an ongoing matter for all small foreclosures. Let's just pretend that's what it's for. And we're going to bill a flat $1,000 a month, but we're still going to list everything we do on the bill. How do we do that? Well, the key to it is to set up what's called a saved transaction with an amount equal to what you want to bill each month. And then another key factor is bill this client every month. Now, as the name implies, a saved transaction will not go away each month. So when you put in a saved fee transaction for $1,000 and you get to the end of the month and you print a bill and you update it, that bill will be updated. All the stuff that may have been listed, which we'll talk about in a second, that you actually did that month that didn't really get billed but it was listed on the bill, that'll go away. But then the next month, that saved $1,000 progress monthly retainer transaction will still be there, and it'll be there to be billed again the next month with different stuff listed underneath it. So the very first thing you do, now a couple things here, the other items that you're going to log are going to be non-billable. So you want this to be a non-billable client. And so you're going to log all your time. We did this. We sent an email. We sent a letter to this person. We sent a cease and desist to that person. We handled this. We took this call, whatever. All these things you're doing for this retainer, you're going to log time, but it's going to be non-billable time. And you'll be able to look later and see for this client how much billable money you brought in, that's the monthly retainer, and how much non-billable money you would have gotten if you'd been billing for it. And that's going to help you to decide whether or not the monthly retainer is enough, and it's going to help you to see what your actual profit margins are on this particular situation where you're charging a monthly retainer. So while we want to go in to the client and set them up as non-billable on the setup tab of the client screen, we don't do that until we've got the monthly retainer saved transaction in. Because if we try to put the monthly retainer saved transaction in, which is a billable transaction, it'll say we can't do that because it's a non-billable client. So before you set up the client, but before you set them to non-billable, you go into the fee screen and you add a fee for this client, and you give it a date. That date will kind of adjust itself each month. There's no hours worked. There's no hours to bill. The rate should probably be $0, but let's say that the amount that we're going to bill each month is $1,000, and you give it a description like monthly retainer. Okay. Now, if I were to print a bill right now for this client, it would look like this, and it would show that monthly retainer. And I'm going to skip down to the second page, which actually has the detail. It's got the attorney's initial, the date, monthly retainer, $1,000. They owe $1,000. It's got a recap. You probably wouldn't be using a recap billing formula because you wouldn't want to show. Well, maybe you would. Maybe you would. If you had a recap, these hours of $0 for the monthly retainer wouldn't show up. But all the stuff that we're going to enter in a minute that's non-billable would show up. It'd say we have this much, and this much, and that much, and then the $1,000 would show up for that timekeeper. But whether or not you have a recap, this is how the monthly retainer will look. And what we also want is to be able to log time and have it show underneath the monthly retainer and say, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this, but we're not charging for it because we have a monthly retainer. So now I'm going to get back out of this bill. And before I do anything else, I'm going to go into the client and I'm going to set them up as non-billable. Now, you don't have to do this, but if you do, then all the time that's entered from this point forward for this client will be non-billable, meaning it will show up with $0 amount due on the bill. We're already billing the $1,000, so we don't want the time we're logging to have any billable amount. So now when I go in and add fees, and I'm just going to add, let's say, 3 of them, and I'm going to make it quick and easy. I'm going to say that we spent 0.4 hours, and you don't worry about this part because it's a non-billable entry. See, non-billable printable. Telephone call to Bob. I'm going to add another one for 0.3 hours, sent cease and desist to Mr. Smith. And let's call it a day with those 2 transactions. So these are the 2 things we did, but we're billing a monthly retainer of $1,000 no matter how much or how little we do. That's the point of a retainer. So now when we print a bill for this client, and we go down to the second page, which is the actual bill. This client's set up to have a cover statement. What we see is a monthly retainer and then everything that we did. With an NC, meaning we're not charging for it, but we spent 0.4 hours, we spent 0.3 hours, we had a total of 0.7. Now, there's no billable hours, so I guess you wouldn't really want to recap down at the bottom. But this is it exactly. Monthly retainer, telephone call to Bob, cease and desist, Mr. Smith. Now, one thing I forgot to do, and you're going to want to make sure you do this right. And in order to show you how this works, I'm going to go set this back to being a billable client so that I can do this. We forgot to make that monthly retainer saved. So I'm going to go in real quick, and you want to do this when you set up the monthly retainer. And here's the key. You've seen it before. Hold or print, H or P. But did you know there's an S for save? That means that this particular entry here, this monthly retainer, let me pull it back up, is going to be a saved entry. Pull that back up. That will never go away even when we update the bill. So to reiterate, we set up the client, we leave them at billable, we create the monthly retainer with whatever amount we want to bill monthly, and we make it saved. We then go into the client and we make them non-billable just so that the time that we enter doesn't need to be changed to non-billable later. You don't have to make the client or the matter non-billable, but then either the attorneys have to remember to put their time in as non-billable, which we all know isn't going to happen, or somebody in billing has to go back and change all those entries to non-billable later. So it's just easier if you go ahead and set them up the right way and then switch them to non-billable and then set the attorneys loose on entering time. Then the time will always go in as non-billable and will always show up that way. So then the key is that when we look at this bill and we print it and we send it to the client and we update it in a final form, then updating it will get rid of this detail down here because that stuff is not set to save. But this monthly retainer will be saved and it will appear on the next bill as well. And the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one until we stop. And so we've used a saved transaction to set up a monthly retainer and log and show the time that's being logged against that monthly retainer. Patty looks like she might have a question. Patty, do you have a question?
I do, Paul. Excuse me. How does this affect the billing realization report?
Well, it affects the realization report however you set this up. Now, I set this up as a rate of 0, hours worked and hours to bill of 0, and $1,000. So what is going to end up happening is that whatever amount they get billed at $1,000 is going to show an exaggerated hourly rate. Now, the fact that you're entering the time as non-billable, I'm not exactly certain that that time actually gets kicked into that report. Let's actually go ahead and do this. Let's print this bill and let's update it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print it in final form, which, as some of you know, you can actually kind of trick the system into doing from here by right-clicking on generate statements and clicking on statements and then pasting in that number and then sneaking over to options and doing a final bill straight from the client manager. And we'll preview it. And now we'll see. It's going to look exactly the same. And of course, I would have done it in a format that doesn't have this recap of hours down there. Oh, actually, my final format doesn't have a recap of hours, which is interesting, which is something you can do. So here it is, $1,000 and 0.7 hours. And I'm going to update that. And I'm trying to think if in realization if I need to enter a payment for it to show. Let's just go real quickly and do a realization for this client. And we'll see. Reports. Management. Where is it? Client. Let's timekeep client realization. There we go. And that is ABC. Oops. And let's just see what we got here. Preview. Yeah, see, there's no collection. However, there are no billed hours. Okay, so that's the key. That's kind of what I'm looking for. It doesn't consider these to be billed hours. So if you're looking at it from a realization standpoint, you're going to see the realization over here from a collection realization standpoint. But if you're looking for a billing realization, you're not really going to get it because it doesn't show any billed hours. So if you're looking at realization from collection, you're going to see it. Once we collect that $1,000 and log the payment, then we'll see 100% realization from a collection standpoint, but you're never going to see a billing realization because it's non-billable time. Now, if you're doing this, you have to treat it differently. You have to look at billable versus non-billable time for this particular timekeeper or for this particular client. And you can do that with a transaction file list. We can do it with certain types of productivity reports that are going to show both billable and non-billable. But realization isn't going to be affected from a billed or billing realization standpoint. Okay, if there are no further questions, I will go ahead and sneak on to my next topic. Now, my next topic, I'm going to actually switch into our tabs, because what I want to show you is how you set up credit cards. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of background here, and we've talked about this in a webinar. I believe I or Mary Jo have talked about it in one of the Paul and Mary Jo shows, and Mary Jo might have even touched in it in one of her e-bites, but we have never talked about credit cards. At least we haven't done it for a very long time in a VUG, in a virtual user group meeting, which is where we are now. And so in version 18, the way credit card processing was done was changed totally. So a little bit of background. When they set up credit card processing to happen in Tabs, they used a company called TSYS, and I think the old program was called PayFlow Pro, but don't quote me on that. And there were some issues with it. It couldn't do e-checks. It couldn't save the transaction information. So if you entered a credit card, you had to enter it for that same client every month, even though the client called and said, hey, discharge the same card. You still had to get those details from them again. And the responsibility for the compliance testing that the credit card companies require lay with the client, with the person who was using Tabs. And so you spent about 2 hours every year filling out a very detailed report about your PCI compliance, your compliance report, certifying that you were doing all the right things to protect the credit card information that you were getting and putting into the billing system. With version 18 and in the end of last year, TSYS had purchased another credit card processor called ProPay, and ProPay has a much more sophisticated back-end infrastructure that lets you now store credit card information in Tabs. You don't actually ever see it again. It's a very encrypted storage methodology. It lets you process and store for future use e-checks. You are no longer required to fill out any compliance information because now all the processing happens on the ProPay side. As you'll see in a second, it doesn't actually store them in Tabs. It stores this information in ProPay back on their servers, which are already PCI compliant. So it's easier to use. It's easier to set up. If you tried to set it up the old way, you know it was an onerous proposition to get credit card processing set up. It saves the transaction information for reuse. It supports e-checks. There is no PCI compliance reporting that you need to do, and the rates are better than anything you'll get anywhere else with the new credit card processing through ProPay. Now, what you do is you go to a link that we will, if you get set up for credit card processing, you will get a link from STI, and you will go and set up an account with ProPay. And this literally takes about 1 minute. You enter some very basic information about the company and the person who's responsible for credit card processing, and you get approved instantly. When you get approved, you get a very long number. I think 2 of them, we'll see in just a second. You go and put them into the right place here in the software, and you're done. Okay, so again, it used to be installing these weird files called DLLs and getting them hooked in right, and then jumping through a million hoops, and then jumping through hoops to get established as a merchant with TSYS. Now you fill out a 1-minute form online. You come into setup. You go into customization. You go over to merchant services, and you enter the merchant ID and the user ID that you get from ProPay when you fill out that, spend that 1 minute and fill out that form. You call it your ProPay account, or you call it whatever you want, and there is a password that is also put into the system. Okay, and then you can test it if you'd like. It'll make sure that it's got the right connection. That's it. That's all there is to do. In a minute, we'll show you how it works. But you do the same thing whether you're using it in Tabs or Trust. And if you are using it in Tabs and Trust, you get 2 merchant accounts. One that handles your processing for and puts it into your bank account, your trust account, puts the money into your trust account, and another separate merchant account that would put money into your operating account. Now the difference is, and this has always been true, when you are putting money into your trust account, if you process a credit card for $1,000 for a client to put money into trust, TSYS has never taken the fees for that transaction out of your trust account. They always take them out of your operating account. And that's a big thing about how STI had to set this up when they set Tabs3 up originally to take these payments. You can put the money in trust, but you can't take the fees out. They have to come out of your operating account. It's not such a big deal for the merchant account that you set up for just processing regular payments. It puts the money in your operating account and takes the fees out. Okay. Now, there are 3 different types of accounts you can set up. You can just have one account for the firm. Okay. And if you had a separate one for trust, when you went into trust, you'd put that information into trust and the operating account information into the tab system. But you can also have separate merchant accounts for different locations, and separate merchant accounts for trust and operating for each of the different locations. Or you can have separate merchant accounts for different timekeepers, so that if you're processing money for that's for Bob Smith, and you're processing a payment that also includes time for John Doe, then you're going to end up using 2 accounts because you've set it up that way. Most firms have one credit card account for merchant services that they process against. It shows up on the bill as, Smith, Smith, and Smith. But sometimes firms will have separate merchant processing accounts for each timekeeper, and also sometimes separate for each location. And that's what that means. That's just a matter of where you're putting the information and how it looks and how it's set up. Now, once you've got it set up, when you go to process either a deposit to trust, if you've got it set up for trust as well, or a payment in Tabs, then what will happen is, when you specify credit card, it'll get those details. So let's go do that. I have a client, I believe it's Attorney Computer Systems, which I believe is one. There we go. This is the one right here. This particular client owes a balance of $1, so let's go process a payment for that. So I'm going to merely say that this client is paying their $1, and here I'm going to say credit card, and that's it. Now, as you know, in the past, when you don't have this set up, you're merely saying, hey, they paid with a credit card, and then you're turning to some other mechanism that you have in your office that's totally unrelated to Tabs. You're processing the credit card, and then you're coming back and putting the payment in here. But watch what happens when we save this here. ProPay pops up. Now, if you had the interface before, or maybe no, you wouldn't still have it because it's not supported anymore. If you had the interface before, you would have been entering this information into Tabs, and that's why Tabs didn't save it. And that's why you had to fill out that PCI compliance report every year that took a couple hours just to fill out. But what you'll notice is that when we continue here, we're actually going to a website. This is actually a browser, and we're going to ProPay's, TSYS's ProPay website. And we're able to swipe a card if we have a card reader right on our keyboard, or add a card. And you can put the name of on the card number, the expiration date, the zip code, and add the card. And it will charge this card. I'm not going to do one here. And it will save it for future use. So that if I had, I'm going to actually go back here. So that if I had saved it for future use, when I continued and went to, I would also see cards listed here that I had saved before. And so I would be able to, next time, after I've added it, next time I'd be able to select that card. And it would only show me the last 4 digits. Everything else would be stored on the site. So that's it. It's very, very simple to do. And I'm going to, again, go back to the card authorization window and just show you that the other alternative, which was not there before, was eCheck, where you put in the routing number, the account number, you confirm the account number, and you identify it as either checking or savings. And again, that information is stored as well. So very good rates. They charge you 50 cents to do an eCheck, and they charge at most, I believe it's for MasterCard and Visa, 1.99%, plus I believe a 20-cent per transaction fee. Don't quote me on this. This is something you should get from TSYS. It's a little bit higher for American Express. So very competitive rates. Very simple to set up, very simple to get accepted and approved by TSYS. You really just fill out a form that takes a minute to fill out, and very simple to use. And that is credit card processing. I think we have a question, Patty.
Paul, how often do people encounter a transaction where a card is swipeable? Most of our transactions are card not present. Have you integrated any websites with the ProPay payment?
Well, I think that's 2 questions, because in order to be swipeable, you'd have to have the card in your hand. Okay, so most of our clients are not swiping credit cards. Okay, although you can, for I believe it's $99, buy a keyboard from TSYS that would plug into your computer. It's a regular keyboard, but it has a swiper on the side. And if you do that, you actually get a lower rate, lower than the 1.99 that I said. So that's the advantage to swiping the card. There's less fraud with swiped cards, although usually in a law firm environment, we're not seeing that much fraud. We've been accepting credit cards forever, and we've never had a fraudulent transaction. I mean, we're not talking about a website that sells vitamins or growth hormone or stuff like that. There's not bound to be fraud there. So swipeable, I don't see it much, but you do get a better rate for it. And I'm glad that the other half of the question got asked, and I'm going to answer it as soon as I explain what this is. Once you've gone and told it, hey, I'm going to process this as a credit card, you either have to process it as a credit card or delete the payment, because you've already saved the payment. And so if you don't process the credit card, you can retain the payment, but it won't be a credit card transaction anymore. It'll get switched to something else. So I'm going to have it delete that. That's what that meant. There is a website that you can use for your clients to go to pay you. And once you get signed up, you'll get that website from TSYS. And it's important to know that you can, at that point, send your clients to that website, and they can say, hey, I'm paying Smith & Smith. I'm paying them for this statement that I received, and here's how much money I want to send them. And then they will enter their credit card information, and it will be available for them to come back and use later. One caveat, that website, unlike the entry through the Tabs payment window, is not tied into Tabs. So although you can use that website to process credit cards against your merchant account that will go into your bank, you will then get an email from TSYS saying, hey, we processed the payment of $100 for ABC foreclosure and or ABC Bank, and for this invoice, whatever number they put in there, and then it's up to you to go enter the payments. So be careful of that. Don't get the impression that that website is going to hook into Tabs. It's not. It can't, because it's not. It's just not hooked into Tabs. When you're making the payment, you're hooked into Tabs, but the website's not. Any more questions, Patty?
There are no more questions.
You see what happens when we don't have Mary Jo? The meetings go longer because I talk too much. And Mary Jo's not here to give me that universal symbol for you're talking too long, Paul. So we do hope that Mary Jo is getting favorable results at the doctor's for her husband, Matthew. And that we certainly hope that she will be back next month when we will be talking about trust and payroll integration. It's going to be two separate integration-related topics. Don't quote me on who's saying what because I forgot to write this down, but I think Mary Jo's talking about trust integration, basically how Tabs integrates with trust and how trust integrates with Tabs. Very important topic because, as most of you know, if it doesn't integrate right, it's really not supposed to integrate at all until a certain point, and that's where the integration comes in. And I'm going to talk about payroll integration. Not many people know that we integrate with a payroll package called Pensoft, and that you can also use that same interface to pull in ADP or Paychex type data straight from an ASCII file. So I'll be talking about that. Now, of course, I would be remiss. I've already taken you here because I wanted you to see that I had used the wrong words to describe what we were talking about today. But I'd be remiss if I didn't emphasize that you can go to our website, which is www.attorneycomputersystems, with an emphasis on that last S in the word systems.com. And once you're there, you will be able to click on videos and see all the different videos that we have, including our 4 live events, the 3 virtual user group meetings, the one that you're in now for Tabs, one for Practice Master, one for World Docs. I also have my monthly Coffee Pot webinar series that talks usually about an add-on product like Pensoft Payroll or like Symphony OCR or all sorts of different things. Next month is going to be HubSpot integration with Practice Master. Mary Jo has her eBytes video series. This is a pre-recorded show. She records 3 of these each month, one for Tabs, one for Practice Master, one for World Docs. And then we also have the Paul and Mary Jo show, which is a longer format, 10, 15, 20-minute long episode where we take a broader topic and go into much greater detail. If you go to something like the Tabs3 virtual user group meetings, you will find a description of the next event. Patty will be changing this sometime later this afternoon for November. Links to register. And then as you scroll down, you'll find recorded versions of all the past webinars or virtual user group meetings or eBytes or whatever there for your enjoyment. So everything you could want to know about Tabs, Practice Master, and World Docs is here. And if you can't find it this browsing way, you can type something in here and search. And it is with great excitement that I point out to you that, where is this? Not only do we have a Tabs, Practice Master, and World Docs virtual user group meeting, but as of this afternoon, I now have Tabs, World Docs, and Practice Master license plates on all of my cars. And I will leave you with that, telling you to have a good rest of the day, a good rest of the month, and we'll see you next month. Thanks much. Bye-bye.